Under the harsh flicker of the outpost's dying lights, Lyra Kane sat alone in the mess hall, a half-filled cup of synth coffee steaming faintly before her. The air tasted of rust and recycled air, heavy with the faint hum of failing generators. Beyond the reinforced glass, the storm of Viral 9 painted the sky in sickly green lightning, splitting across the horizon like veins. Most humans posted to this rock hated the storms. Lyra found them soothing. Each flash reminded her that chaos was predictable if you learned its rhythm. She raised the mug to her lips and took a slow sip, unbothered by the tremor that ran through the floor. Somewhere deep in the compound, machinery screamed in protest before cutting off entirely. Silence followed, deep and deliberate. Her hand didn't shake. She had lived through worse than silence. From the corner of her vision, the shadows shifted. A ripple, faint and fluid, as if the light bent around something alive. Lyra didn't look directly at it. The creature there, her companion, her weapon, responded to intention more than command. She didn't need to speak to remind it she was calm. Calm was the signal. The comm device on the table crackled with static. Cadet Kane, report, came a strained voice, Sergeant Marek from the monitoring tower. We're reading multiple inbound signatures. Not human. Fast approach vector. Looks like the transmission ended in a hiss. Lyra didn't move. She set the mug down carefully, tracing her thumb over the chipped rim. The warmth steadied her pulse, a reminder that she was still flesh and blood, still something separate from the thing in the dark. A low vibration shuddered through the walls. Dust rained down from the exposed piping above. Outside, in the dim glow of the storm, faint silhouettes moved, tall, angular shapes gliding toward the outpost on 6-jointed limbs. The alien hunters had found them at last. They were patient predators, known across the fringe colonies for their efficiency. They hunted humans not for resources, but for trophies. Lyra rose, straightened her uniform, and brushed off a smear of coffee from her sleeve. The motion was deliberate, almost ceremonial. She walked to the nearest console, fingers flying across the cracked screen until a display flickered to life. 3 red blips, closing fast. She could try to hide. That was protocol. But protocol was written for soldiers who feared death, not for those who had already bargained with it. A whisper stirred inside her mind, low and guttural, words forming not in sound but in sensation. Hunger. Permission. Her jaw tightened. Not yet. The shadow behind her stilled, folding itself into silence once more. The first impact rattled the walls like a cannon blast. Metal screamed as the outer gates buckled under assault. Lyra could hear the faint, high-pitched clicks of the aliens communicating through vibration. The sound crawled under her skin, too precise to be random. She took another sip of coffee, savoring the bitter taste that anchored her in the moment. A flash of movement. The outer door collapsed inward. The alien hunters poured through, their carapaces glistening under the flickering lights. They were taller than she remembered from the archives, their bodies a blend of armor and sinew. 6 eyes glowed faintly, each set tracking a different motion. The lead creature raised a spear that hummed with plasma energy and pointed it directly at her. Lyra didn't step back. Her gaze met the creature's with the steady indifference of someone observing weather. One of the aliens screeched a command. The others fanned out, circling her. Their movements were elegant, almost ritualistic. They knew she was unarmed, and perhaps that made the hunt more satisfying. Lyra inhaled slowly. The air smelled of ozone and scorched metal. Her heartbeat matched the rhythm of the thunder outside. Every instinct told her to run, to fight, to panic, but training and something older than training held her in place. She had seen a monster work before. Panic would only confuse it. Calm kept it focused. The lead alien lunged forward, spear flashing. The tip stopped inches from her face as it met invisible resistance. A low hum filled the air, and the shadows around Lyra thickened. The creature hissed, jerking its weapon back, but it was too late. A tendril of blackness whipped out, wrapping around its throat. Lyra exhaled, slow and quiet. The shadow unfurled into shape, a being both fluid and solid, built of darkness and pulsing veins of crimson light. Its head brushed the ceiling. Its eyes, if they could be called that, burned with primal hunger. The alien hunters recoiled, hissing and clicking in confusion. Kael had arrived. He didn't roar or bellow. His presence alone made the air tremble. Lyra's reflection wavered in the surface of her coffee as the creature moved. She didn't watch the fight directly. She didn't need to. The connection between them transmitted everything. The tearing of flesh, the crunch of armor, the alien cries swallowed by shadow. Each sound was a note in a symphony she'd heard too many times before. Metal twisted. One alien was hurled across the room, crashing into the far wall. Another tried to retreat, only to be dragged, screaming into the darkness beneath Kael's mass. Plasma fire erupted, filling the room with strobing light. But the creature absorbed it all, energy bleeding into its form like ink into water. Lyra took another sip. Her hand was steady. When the noise finally faded, the storm outside had quieted too, leaving only the soft hum of the wind through shattered metal. The floor was slick with alien ichor that shimmered like mercury. Kael loomed silently, tendrils retracting as he dissolved back into shadow. Lyra placed the empty mug on the table and stared at the wreckage around her. For a moment, she listened for the sound of another attack, another tremor, but none came. "Efficient as always," she murmured. From the darkness, a faint pulse of warmth brushed against her mind. Satisfaction. Obedience. She allowed herself a small smile. "Good. Stay alert. They'll send more." Outside, lightning split the horizon again, casting her face in white light. For an instant, she looked almost peaceful, a human untouched by fear in a universe built to devour her kind. Then the light faded, and only the scent of coffee and blood remained. She turned toward the comm device, its red light blinking weakly. Somewhere beyond this storm, someone would notice the silence of Outpost Theta 9. Let them come. Let them see what humanity had become. Lyra picked up the mug again, though it was empty now, and waited. The storm would bring them soon enough. Kael lingered at the edge of perception, a restless silhouette coiled in the corners of the shattered mess hall. Lyra felt his agitation pulsing faintly in the back of her mind, an animal heartbeat pressing against her calm. The storm outside had grown quieter, yet the air was charged with the kind of silence that always came before something worse. The first wave had been only a probe. She knew it, and so did Kael. The alien hunters never retreated without reason. They regrouped, recalculated, and returned. Lyra walked among the wreckage, her boots leaving faint prints in the slick metallic residue that once pulsed through alien veins. The smell clung to the recycled air like burnt sugar and iron. She knelt near the remains of the lead hunter, studying the fragmented weapon that had nearly touched her. The plasma spear's power core still hummed faintly, a sign of superior engineering. The aliens' technology fascinated her in a detached way. They evolved for killing, but so had humans, though humanity's tools were different, subtler, more patient. She turned the spear in her hand, watching blue light run across its cracked surface. "They underestimated us," she said softly. Kael's shadow stirred in acknowledgement. Through the narrow viewport, flashes of movement rippled against the storm clouds. The next wave was coming. The outpost defense turrets, still half-functional, rotated with a mechanical whine, trying to track targets too fast for their aging sensors. Lyra could almost hear Marek's voice in her memory, lecturing her about protocol and defensive positioning. He would have told her to seal the doors, conserve power, and pray for reinforcement. But Marek was gone now, like everyone else. The only reinforcements left were monsters of humanity's own making. Kael's presence thickened, a living fog that filled the edges of her thoughts. His hunger was growing. It always did after a battle. Lyra felt the pull, a primal craving that wasn't entirely his. The symbiotic bond blurred their boundaries in subtle ways, and she often wondered where she ended and he began. Sometimes she thought she could still feel the echo of his human mind, trapped beneath layers of rage and instinct. She had stopped trying to separate their consciousness long ago. It was like arguing with a storm. The walls shuddered. The aliens were breaching from below this time. Clever. They must have analyzed Kael's attack pattern and chosen the path of least exposure. Lyra backed away from the viewport, setting down the broken spear. Her breathing slowed until it matched the steady rhythm of Kael's psychic pulse. The connection deepened, threading through her spine like a current of molten metal. The floor erupted. Shards of steel and dirt cascaded upward as the new wave poured through the torn foundation. These hunters were larger, reinforced with layers of bone and glimmering chitin. Their weapons gleamed with crimson energy, a deliberate mimicry of Kael's aura. Lyra realized with a chill that they had adapted not just their tactics, but their physiology to counter him. Kael materialized fully, his form rippling from shadow into substance. The moment his claws met the floor, the temperature dropped several degrees. Lyra could feel his rage, not the mindless fury of a beast, but the sharpened edge of something that remembered being caged. He struck before the first alien could raise its weapon, slicing it cleanly in two. The others retaliated immediately, coordinated, their movements almost telepathic. Plasma fire illuminated the room in bursts of red and blue. Lyra moved through the chaos with unhurried precision, her boots crunching over glass and bone. Each time Kael was struck, she felt the echo, a faint sting, not pain but awareness. They were one system, one weapon. She guided him through subtle thought, redirecting his attacks, pulling him away from traps. The aliens fought fiercely, adapting faster than she expected. One managed to wound Kael's shoulder, the energy burning through his flesh like acid. Lyra flinched, a brief tightening around her eyes, and Kael responded with explosive violence, eviscerating three of them in a blur of movement. The battle stretched into something rhythmic. Attack, recoil, adapt, strike again. The outpost's walls buckled, lights flickering out until only the glow of plasma and bioluminescent ichor remained. Lyra could feel the strain building between them. Kael was pushing his limits, feeding more aggressively, drawing energy from the environment, from her, from anything he could reach. His hunger had no boundary, and for the first time, Lyra sensed the faint pull of resistance in her mind. "Enough," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the carnage. But Kael did not stop. The psychic bond pulsed harder, pain blooming behind her eyes. She stumbled backward, clutching the edge of a broken table. "Kael, that's enough." The command struck through the link like a whip. The monster froze mid-motion, claws poised above a dying alien's chest. The creature hissed one last time before collapsing, its body twitching in the spreading pool of light. Kael remained still, trembling with barely contained power. Lyra steadied her breath, forcing her heartbeat back under control. The symbiosis required constant balance. Too much emotion from either side, and the bond could rupture. The last time that happened, she had woken up surrounded by what was left of her unit. She wouldn't let it happen again. Gradually, Kael receded, his body breaking apart into tendrils that sank into the floor, leaving only the faint echo of his breathing in her thoughts. Lyra stood in the ruins, chest rising and falling, every muscle trembling from exertion she hadn't physically expended. The storm outside had shifted to a deep violet hue, lightning crawling silently across the sky. The smell of ozone was thicker now, like the air before a chemical fire. She turned toward the surviving wall console, its screen cracked but functional. The long-range sensors were dead, but the short-range feeds still worked, and what she saw there made her pause. A massive energy signature was descending from orbit, far stronger than the previous waves. The aliens were not retreating, they were escalating. A commander, perhaps. A true hunter. Lyra's reflection stared back at her from the broken glass, eyes ringed with exhaustion and faint luminescence. She pressed a hand against the console, feeling the hum of the storm through the metal. "They're learning," she murmured. Kael's voice brushed the edge of her consciousness. No longer words, but emotion. A question. Her lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "So will we." The wind outside roared again, carrying the distant sound of descending engines. Lyra turned away from the console and reached for her mug, now cold and chipped at the rim. She held it loosely, grounding herself in the mundane act of being human. Around her, the outpost was little more than debris, yet it still stood, defiant against the dark. She looked toward the doorway, where Kael's shadow lingered faintly, restless but waiting. "We're not done," she said. The storm answered with another flash of lightning, and for an instant the shadow swelled, stretching higher than before, shaped by the same quiet resolve that burned behind her eyes. Then darkness folded in again, heavy and expectant. The next hunt was already on its way. The sky tore open with a low, rolling groan that made the ground tremble beneath Lyra's boots. The storm clouds above the outpost parted just long enough to reveal a descending shape, massive, angular, and alive with shifting crimson light. The alien commander had arrived. Its vessel struck the plateau beyond the compound, throwing waves of dust and static through the air. Every screen still functioning flickered once before dying completely, leaving only the pulse of the storm to paint the ruins in color. Lyra stood at the broken entrance of the mess hall, her silhouette stark against the distant glow. She felt Kael stirring within her mind again, his presence a steady, rhythmic pressure behind her eyes. She walked outside, the wind clawing at her uniform. The world smelled of ozone and decay. Scattered bodies of the hunters from the previous wave littered the ground, their fluids mixing with the falling rain in a sheen of iridescent silver. Above them, the commander emerged, a towering figure encased in black armor that shimmered with veins of molten red. Its head was crowned with serrated fins, each one pulsing faintly, like a heartbeat turned inside out. Lyra felt its mind brush hers, invasive and cold, probing for weakness. Kael reacted instantly, flaring to life around her. The connection between them deepened until her breath matched his, until the world seemed to move to a single pulse. The commander's voice came not in sound, but through vibration, a deep, resonant hum that translated directly into meaning. "Human, you command the abomination. Explain your defiance." Lyra's lips barely moved. "Defiance is what keeps us alive." The alien tilted its head, as if studying an insect that refused to die. Then, without further warning, it raised an arm and unleashed a burst of energy that split the ground between them. Kael surged forward, intercepting the attack, the impact shaking the air with the sound of cracking stone. Energy rippled through his form, burning holes where it touched, yet he advanced without hesitation. The commander moved with terrifying grace, its limbs blurring as it met Kael head-on. The clash was cataclysmic. Shadows and light collided, each strike lighting the storm like a dying star. Lyra felt every blow reverberate through her bones. She struggled to maintain control over Kael, directing his movements through sheer will. The connection was straining. His rage was immense, his instincts feral. But beneath it, she sensed something new, a thread of desperation. The commander was stronger than anything they had faced before, its movements too fluid, its power nearly inexhaustible. Kael's claws raked across the alien's chest, tearing through armor and releasing a hiss of violet steam. The commander retaliated with a strike that threw Kael back, slamming him into the side of the outpost. The impact collapsed what little remained of the wall. Lyra fell to her knees, gasping as feedback seared through the link. Her vision blurred, colors bending and bleeding together. She could feel Kael's pain as if it were her own. "Get up," she whispered, forcing the words through clenched teeth. "We're not finished." Kael rose slowly, his form flickering between substance and shadow. The commander advanced, each step sending small tremors through the ground. Lyra staggered to her feet, her hand pressed against the nearest piece of debris for balance. She could feel the link weakening, threads of thought slipping between them like sand through fingers. If it broke now, Kael would become uncontrollable, a storm without direction. The alien spoke again, its voice echoing through her skull. "You corrupt creation. You bind chaos and call it strength. Humanity is disease. Lyra wiped blood from her mouth and smiled faintly. And yet here we are, outliving our doctors. The commander lunged, and Kael met it mid-stride. Their collision created a shockwave that shattered the remaining glass of the outpost. Energy arced across the field, illuminating the storm like veins of fire. Lyra closed her eyes, surrendering the last fragments of restraint. The link deepened beyond safety, their minds fusing completely. She no longer directed Kael, she became him. The world sharpened into terrifying clarity. Every raindrop was a blade of motion, every vibration a map of sound. Together they moved as one, weaving through the commander's attacks, countering with precision born of shared instinct. The alien's power flared again, but Kael, no, Lyra through Kael, absorbed the energy, converting pain into momentum. Their merged consciousness was pure focus, stripped of fear, stripped of separation. They struck with synchronized fury. Claws met armor, tendrils pierced joints, and the air filled with the roar of two forces locked in perfect opposition. The commander staggered, ichor spilling from the gashes in its chest, but it refused to fall. It reached out and seized Kael's throat, lifting him into the air. Lyra's vision dimmed. Oxygen and thought were one sensation of suffocation. In that moment, she saw flashes, Kael before transformation, the experiment that birthed him, his eyes human and pleading. She remembered promising him control, a choice he never truly had. With the last of her strength, she whispered through the bond, "Let go." Kael's form erupted outward, his essence splitting into a storm of energy and shadow. The explosion ripped through the plateau, engulfing both combatants in a vortex of crimson light. The commander's body convulsed, armor liquefying under the force, until nothing remained but molten shards that cooled instantly in the rain. When the light faded, only Lyra stood, smoke rising from her skin. The silence that followed was immense. The storm had broken, leaving a strange, almost gentle drizzle. Kael was gone, dissolved completely, leaving only an echo of warmth in the back of her mind. She touched her temple and found no response, no pulse of thought. The bond was severed. A hollow ache settled in her chest, but beneath it was something sharper, clarity. The commander's ship still burned in the distance, its wreckage glowing faintly through the rain. Lyra walked toward it, each step deliberate, her movements steady despite exhaustion. Around her, the bodies of the fallen hunters lay still. The world was quiet now, save for the soft hiss of cooling metal. She reached the edge of the crater where Kael's energy had struck hardest. A pool of molten debris reflected her image, human still, though her eyes burned faintly red in the dim light. She crouched beside the wreckage and picked up a twisted fragment of the alien's armor. It pulsed weakly in her hand, a dying rhythm that matched her heartbeat. She considered crushing it, but instead slipped it into her pocket. Proof, perhaps, that monsters were not bound to one species alone. As the last of the storm faded, Lyra turned back toward the ruins of the outpost. The lights were gone, the calm tower silent. Somewhere out there, other human colonies would eventually notice the signal loss and come searching. When they did, they would find her waiting, the only survivor of Theta 9, calm as ever. She glanced up at the pale, fractured sky, then down at her empty hand. The faint scent of coffee still lingered on her sleeve. Next time, she murmured, "Send more hunters." The wind carried her words into the quiet distance, and for a moment, it almost sounded like Kael's laughter echoing in the rain. Then the sound faded, leaving only silence and the steady rhythm of a survivor's heartbeat, unbroken and utterly human.